It's time for the Your Personal Bank Show with Ference Toth, financial literacy educator and speaker, entrepreneur, and chairman of the board of A Bank Information. Take charge of your financial future with your personal bank. Now here's Ference Toth.
Welcome to the Your Personal Bank Show. First and foremost, I want to put out our thoughts and prayers to those loved ones of the service members who've been killed in Afghanistan recently. Our hearts go out to them, also to those who are out there, U.S. citizens and our allies who are, well, frankly, stuck behind enemy lines currently and can't get to the airport to get out. We just want to say I wish them the best. Again, our hearts and prayers are with them, and I hope and pray that as many get out as possible. Now, the thing is, what we have to look at is what's caused this, why we have this debacle in Afghanistan, and frankly, well, there's no one really to point to more than Biden. He himself has said he alone made the decision, although there were many other advisors around him. The finger pointing has gone on. Here's my opinion, and also I'm going to talk about how I think this is going to impact us, Americans, our money, the economy, all those kinds of things. I believe Afghanistan has the potential to create, and everything around it has the potential to create some really ugly scenarios. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but it certainly has the potential. You know, those of you that are old enough to remember the Carter years, and we had the Iran embassy folks, the hostages, the Iranian hostages. And don't quote me on this, but I think there was around 30 or 40 hostages that the terrorists held for over a year, well over a year. It dominated the news cycle. It dramatically impacted the Carter administration in a very negative way. And most, I think, can agree it's what led to him losing re-election, getting, Ronald Reagan becoming into office and all that. This situation is 1,000 times worse than that one. And here's what I mean by it. First of all, I don't think anyone can agree or would agree that Carter caused the Iranian hostage crisis. It's something that happened, and what he got blamed for was really not doing anything about it to get our people out, okay? And we're talking 30 or 40 people, roughly. This situation, clearly and obviously, by his own admission, is Biden's fault. He created this. And there's a lot of stuff around it, but the main thing, the one thing I keep going back to, the one key point that I think is supremely important is any person of any intelligence whatsoever understands, you don't have to be a military person or anything like that, but anyone with any intelligence whatsoever understands that when you withdraw, you take out the civilians first, the women and the children, the civilians, and then the military last, not the other way around. Look, there is no way in my mind, no logical argument, no discussion, no excuse, no anything that I can think of. I think a kindergartner could figure this out, is my point. The civilians first, the military last. The guys with the guns come out last because they can defend themselves. That's what's created this debacle. And that's what it is, an absolute catastrophic debacle. We have, according to their own admission, 15,000 American citizens in Afghanistan right now behind enemy lines. We have, who knows how many thousands, tens of thousands, frankly, allies who helped us and helped our military and helped our people. And this debacle has gotten so bad, they went and held an airport and said to people, get to the airport, we'll get you out. Yeah, good luck with that. I mean, you literally risk your life getting to the airport if you're behind enemy lines in Afghanistan at this point, to get to freedom and safety. And now service members have been killed. These are Navy SEALs. These are highly trained individuals. Anyone involved with this decision to pull out the military first and the civilians last, frankly, does not deserve to lead. absolutely does not deserve to lead, period. A lot of people are calling for resignations, impeachments, and I'm fully on board with that. We can't have this type of horrendous lack of leadership. And I'm saying I blame the military leadership just as much as Biden. Yes, Biden's a commander-in-chief, and they're supposed to follow his orders to a point. I was in the Army myself, and we've even taught that. Look, if an order is given to you by a superior officer that is, well, catastrophic, that's going to cause loss of life or is just absolute, you have the right to defy that order. Now, you don't use that willy-nilly, but who in their right mind can even think or comprehend that pulling out the military first and civilians last is a good idea? It's a catastrophic, bad idea. I don't care what kind of excuses they give. They should all resign in disgrace. Every one of them that was involved in military leadership. What should have happened is if Biden indeed, as he stated, told them to do that, made that decision, they should have protested and threatened to resign en masse if necessary to prevent such a catastrophic action. You just don't do that. That is not a military leader. That, by definition, you're not a military leader. You know, if we don't have a government, if our government doesn't protect its civilians, what's the point of having a government at all? We could expand that upon some of the riots that occurred in various cities around the country where the state and local governments failed to protect the citizens. But here's a case where our national government has failed to protect our citizens and now has put our military in harm's way worse than they were before. In fact, I thought about this. So, the attack, the suicide bomber attack recently killed more service members than any loss of life in the past decade for the military. That's how bad this is. And here's the part that I fear. Here's where my greatest concern is. This could be just the beginning. In other words, there are thousands and thousands of American citizens in Afghanistan, as we speak, behind enemy lines, in harm's way. Let's be honest. What do you think is going to happen? Are we going to see more bad headlines, see more bad things of happening to citizens and service members and various things? And the sad truth is, I don't see any way around it at this point. And again, it was caused by Biden's decision that he admitted himself to pull out the military first and the civilians last, which is completely and totally idiotic on any measure, any standard. Now, what's the repercussions? What's the results of all this? Well, I imagine there's going to be quite a few, and some of them are going to be. There's actually some silver linings, but there could potentially be a lot of negative things too. I mean, the first off, right off the bat, in the short term, our federal government was preparing or gearing up to spend another $1.2 trillion on infrastructure and then another $3.5 trillion on another quote unquote infrastructure bill. Now, frankly, very small percentage of it, especially in the boondoggle of $3.5 trillion would go to what most people would define as infrastructure. But that's beside the point. The main point is our federal government's already spent over $6 trillion over the last little over a year since COVID, which is far more in excess of the amount of money that our federal government has ever spent any government has ever spent in human history. A mind-boggling amount of money. It's beyond comprehension. And they're wanting to spend another $3.5 trillion plus 1.2, which would be more than 50% more on top of everything else, with the debt we have, with the economy we have, inflation rising as we speak. From a financial standpoint, for the average American, if the government was to indeed do this, I think we would see some serious, devastating financial impact for a lot of people, mostly inflation. the good news about all this Afghanistan debacle, is I firmly believe Biden has lost an awful lot of political capital from many who even supported him. This and the news on this is not only bad, it's horrendous and continues to get worse. And unfortunately, as I stated before, I believe that's going to continue for a while. So the good news is that type of spending, those kinds of things that the Democrats were wanting to do, are now probably off the table. In fact, I was at a conference this past week, and one of the lobbyist groups that spoke was interesting. They deal with this very thing, and they themselves stated they do not believe Nancy Pelosi has the votes necessary to pass this $3.5 trillion bill. That's good news for anyone who's fiscally responsible, which is most people who are listening to me right now. So in the short term, there's some silver lining to this. And there's been many things. If you listen to the show at all, you know there's been many things the Biden administration has done this year that I absolutely disagree with vehemently, because I believe most of it is very bad for the average American. I've talked about who it's good for, mostly big business and big government. But for the average American, most of the actions taken are going to impact a very negative way the average American. So their ability to do things that they've wanted to do has probably been curtailed significantly. And that is good. The bad news, though, is what else are they going to end up screwing up? I mean, they've screwed this up royally, this Afghanistan thing, to the point where I don't know if you were in position with this situation, you decided you were going to withdraw. And here's one thing I want you to understand. I believe, personally, that we should have been out of Afghanistan 19 years ago, not now. We went into chase and try to get Osama bin Laden. I get that. That's fine. But once we realized he wasn't there, I don't know why we stayed. Well, I mean, I do know why we stayed. The military-industrial complex saw money-making opportunity. That's what I believe. But we had no business being there. Nation building, all that. Should have pulled out a long, long time ago. But if you're going to pull out and you were going to try to create a situation that was more horrendous, more negative, worse than what is happening, I'm not sure you could do it. That's if you intentionally were trying to screw this up. So I'm going to recommend staying tuned in the next segment. We're going to talk more about this and how this potentially could impact all of us. So stay tuned.
For more information on Your Personal Bank, feel free to contact Ference at yourpersonalbank.com. Back to the Your Personal Bank Show with Ference Toth.
Welcome back to the Your Personal Bank Show. Really, today we're talking about how this Afghanistan debacle likely will impact the average American, our country, our economy, our money, all those things. Like I was saying in the first segment, if you missed it, I encourage you to go to yourpersonalbank.com. You can listen to any of the previously recorded shows anytime you want. But and if you want to contact me for more information, I'll be happy to talk to you about it. Again, it's yourpersonalbank.com. The thing I'm going to say is this. Short term, like I said, I think there's a few silver linings in that the current administration is, in my opinion, I believe they're mortally wounded in terms of what they want to try to accomplish. And the fact that what they want to accomplish is overwhelmingly, in my opinion, negative for the average American. It's very Marxist, socialist type of agenda, big government, changing the fundamental, becoming a dependency society versus a opportunity society. I think all those things are very negative for folks, even for those people who support it, because I don't believe many of them really truly understand the full impact of what would happen if they were able to change things the way they wanted to. I think their ability to do that has been severely curtailed, and I'm going to say that's a very, very good thing for the average American, certainly for those who are fiscally responsible folks, okay? What is going to happen? Wow, that's a tough one because, you've heard me talk about this a lot. I think Mark Twain said it when he said, history doesn't repeat itself, but it certainly rhymes. And the biggest rhyme I could say that I feel like from this is those of you that remember the Carter years. You know, we had a situation where, of course, high inflation, higher gas prices. We had the Iranian hostage crisis. Those were all things that really negatively impacted our country in a big way. Many people consider Carter one of the worst president in modern history. It appears Biden has now bypassed that just in a matter of months. Because why I say that is Carter, most people agree, Carter didn't create the Iranian hostage crisis. It happened. What he got blamed for was not really doing anything about it. Biden created this. He pulled the troops out before you pull out the civilians. What idiot would do that? And I would say that to the military leadership. What are they thinking? What's wrong with them? They should resign in disgrace or be impeached or whatever. They're not military leaders. They're complete, total imbeciles if they thought this was a good idea. And if they didn't, they tried to stop them. They obviously didn't try hard enough. They should have threatened to resign en masse because this is a disastrous result, which any idiot could have predicted. But that's a whole other thing. How's this going to go? Well, you know, what do you think? Here's what I want to understand. A lot of people pay attention to the stock markets and things like that as a barometer. And a lot of wealth from IRAs and 401ks, of course, are tied up into the markets for a lot of average Americans and wealthier Americans. The thing is, a string of bad news. Because here's the thing about Afghanistan. We have, according to the Biden administration, there's 10 or 15,000 U.S. citizens now behind enemy lines. What do you think the Taliban and terrorists are going to do about it? They're just going to let them go freely? You know, we had a suicide bomber who killed some service members recently, right? My point is simple. It's the worst attack on the U.S. military in over a decade. So far. And I think the key word there is so far. Sadly, I firmly believe we're going to see far more bad news about people being injured, killed, held as hostages, you name it. A string of bad news over a period of time, what does that do to people's psyche? You know, our country, the U.S. as a country during the Iranian hostage crisis, for example, again, history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. Was it a low ebb? The country didn't feel very good about itself in general. And I think you could say that with a lot of people, not all people. I still feel good about the country because I still know a lot of really good people in this country. And to me, the country is really made up of the people, not the leadership. I mean, I guess it depends on your definition of what the country is, but in my opinion, it's about the good old Americans, average folks who, generally speaking, you know, just want to be left alone, raise their families, run their business, do their job, and, you know, they're good, solid folks. And they're still, here's the thing I want you to understand, people. I've been doing some traveling recently. I've been in Washington, and not Washington, Utah and Wyoming and Idaho and Nevada, all in the last couple of months, doing some work traveling, I'm enjoying some vacation time with the family. I went to a conference. And the thing is, and I've been in the conference talking to people all over the country, generally speaking, most folks are pretty decent people. And they want the same thing. They just want to be left alone. They want to, like I said, raise their family, live their life, do their business job, whatever it is, and generally be left alone. And when you hear a string of bad news, like Americans being killed, service members being killed, and that starts becoming... that repeats itself and it's going to have a negative impact. You know, here's the reality. If you take the price of any asset, whether it's real estate, the stock market, whatever. The price of a stock, for example, the price of a piece of real estate, the value is what is the value of an asset? The true value of an asset is what is somebody else willing to pay for it? Right? I mean, when it really comes down to it, the bottom line is, what does somebody else think it's worth, and what are they willing to pay for it? That's the true value. And human emotions, people, we're all human beings, play a big part in that. And things like real estate, but probably even more so the stock market in particular, the value really has a lot to do with, a lot of people call it sentiment, what people think, how they're feeling, what do they think the future of the economy is, what are they, is it positive, is it negative, that kind of thing. The psyche of the average person makes a difference. If the majority are negative, you're going to see things go down. If the majority is positive, you'll see things go up. Negative news like that has an impact on people's psyche. There's no two ways about it. Hearing about our service members being killed, that's just a negative thing. And our news, typically, is very efficient at putting it out there in front of us repeatedly. So we get hammered with this bad news. And the sad thing is, I believe this is going to be an ongoing thing, an ongoing cycle that likely can get much worse than it is now already. So certainly that has to be a consideration if you have an asset at risk, say risk to the market or real estate or anything like that, where the market forces impact the value of that asset. That's one reason why looking at something like Your Personal Bank that has underlying guarantees that you can lock in can become very valuable at a time like this. So you certainly should look into it. Like I said, contact me at yourpersonalbank.com for more information. I'll be happy to talk to you about it. Stay tuned in the next segment. I'm going to talk to you more about what I think other potential things that could happen going forward. So stay tuned. Don't miss it.
For more information on Your Personal Bank, feel free to contact Ference at yourpersonalbank.com. Back to the Your Personal Bank Show with Ference Toth.
Welcome back to the Your Personal Bank Show. And like I said, we're talking about how this Afghanistan debacle that our leadership, current leadership, has foisted upon ourselves by making incredibly stupid decisions. There's no way to put it. Pull out the military before you pull out civilians. How can you justify that as a good idea? I cannot fathom that. But the point I'm really wanting to talk about is how does this all impact us? I mean, it's bad enough for those people. My gosh, my heart goes out to them. They're in a war zone. They're behind the enemy lines. How would you feel if your government said, well, sorry, we can't help you, but if you get through the enemy and get to this airport, which might be miles away, and then we'll get you out, but we can't do anything for you. How would that make you feel? I mean, it's got to be terrifying at best. But like I said, this situation has gotten worse. Service members have been killed. The sad part is it likely will get worse because we have so many people, 10, 15,000 U.S. citizens behind enemy lines. We've never had a situation really like this as a country. I mean, if you want to go back in history, since the War of 1812, I mean, having U.S. citizens behind, well, I guess World War II, we had service members behind enemy lines. But as far as citizens go, gosh, you got to go back a long way. So this is extraordinarily bad news caused by our current leadership and Biden himself. What I'm trying to say is this bad leadership, these bad decisions, these bad news have a tremendous ability of being negative on the psyche of the average individual, the average American. I'm not saying it's going to cause a stock market crash per se or whatever, but there certainly could be major impacts. It will, I believe, impact how things go forward. And having some guarantees, diversifying, well, in my opinion, is probably more important than ever. I mean, it's always important to diversify and have some monies that are not subject to risk and diversify and all that. That's been standard investing mantra 101, from day one, right? But it's probably in times of uncertainty, it's more important than ever. And in times of what I would consider extremely bad leadership, poor leadership, which is what I believe we have right now, and that's almost universally recognized, by the way, around the world. What I guess the scary part is, what else What other bad decisions, whatever stupid things are they going to incorporate or because of what they're doing happen, be foisted upon us? I mean, like I said, I'm not wishing this stuff on anyone. People are talking about this. This is no secret. But, our southern border is pretty much, it's never been more open than it's in decades. It's easier to get across the border than it's been in decades. We have an entire country run by the Taliban now, who is the number one supporter of terrorism around the world. They already have suicide bombers attacking our troops in Afghanistan. What's to stop them from attacking a target inside the U.S., getting into the U.S. and then attacking some target in the U.S.? Again, I firmly, don't misunderstand me. I hope that never happens. I hope and pray that does not happen. But we have to be real. We have to plan accordingly. I always tell people, look, plan for the worst and hope for the best. I'm not a negative person per se. Generally, I'm a pretty upbeat and optimistic person. So I find this rather difficult to share. Just like I did, people gave me a hard time back in March of 2020 when I started sounding the alarm, basically, that COVID could create a problem with our economy. And at first, people were giving me a hard time. Oh, the sky is falling. No, there was valid reasons for it. And I see valid reasons for this. What I'm trying to say is this. What if a major terrorism event occurs inside the United States because our southern border is wide open, basically? How do you think that's going to impact our economy, our country, how people feel, the stock market, real estate? You want an example? Look at 9/11. Look at what happened to our economy and the markets and things like that after 9/11. You see my point. My point is you need to be prepared for the worst, plan for the worst, hope for the best. Have a diversification strategy. Have some assets that are not subject to market risk. Have some things with underlying guarantees, and you can grow the money tax-free and access it tax-free so you're not subject to whatever future tax rates we may be facing, and have liquidity and access and all those things and create positive arbitrage. It's important to do all those things, okay? But what I'm also going to share, and I'm going to touch on this, I'm going to hit this hard on the next segment, there's other ways to look at creating positive arbitrage and making your money work for you more so, multiple times, which will become increasingly important as inflation increases. So I'm going to strongly encourage you to stay tuned in the next segment. I'm going to hit on this, open up a couple of other ideas I haven't really shared or haven't for a very long time, so stay tuned.
For more information on Your Personal Bank, feel free to contact Ference at yourpersonalbank.com. Back to the Your Personal Bank Show with Ference Toth.
Okay, welcome back to the Your Personal Bank Show. All right, we've talked enough about some of the bad news, things that could happen due to this Afghanistan debacle, potential risks, certainly higher terrorism threats, both in and outside of the United States, lack of leadership, and the loss of confidence that often occurs as a result. So, what are some things that we can do? Well, obviously, I've talked about this already several times on this show and many others. Diversification is one key strategy to mitigate risk, and often people misunderstand diversification. What I mean by it is diversifying into non-correlated assets. Look, if you're just in various sectors of the stock market, you're still in the stock market. That's not true diversification. That's not diversification in non-correlated assets. What I mean is maybe diversifying into some real estate, diversifying into maybe some precious metals or other assets, or something with some underlying guarantees like Your Personal Bank, which is probably ideal in terms of diversification strategy for mitigating risk. Like I said, there's underlying guarantees. We have companies that have been paying here's some great news. One of the companies I've been working with that we recommend often, I've said to people many times, we have companies that are still paying 5.75 to 6% dividends. Even today, I've never paid less than that for the last 26 plus years and never miss a dividend since literally before the Civil War. One of the companies just affirmed they're going to continue to pay that dividend through 2022. and maybe 2023, even in this low interest rate environment. So in other words, we're looking at companies that have never paid less than that and are making commitments for the next year or more on committing to those rates going forward. That's strong. That's powerful, folks. And by the way, that's 5.75%, 6% rates. And if you do it right, tax-free with guarantees. That's pretty darn strong, okay? But we also talk about the positive arbitrage, because if you put your monies in one of these high cash value policies to get the dividends, which is the goal of the personal bank process, and then you decide you want to access those monies for whatever reason, it's wiser typically to access them through a bank line of credit because the borrowing costs are cheaper. We have banks that are charging between 3.95%. Most of our clients are in the 3.25% range, just so you know. So my point is simple. If you're making 5.75 to 6% dividends, and then you access the funds from the bank line and you're getting charged, say, 3.25%, what's your money doing? Well, the answer is simple. You're still earning 2.5 to 3% positive arbitrage, which, by the way, has historically been the case. I've got charts going back 40 years showing that the positive arbitrage scenario applies every single month for the last 40 years except 2 months, and those happen to be equal. So in other words, in low, medium, or high interest rate environments, this positive arbitrage scenario has been there for the past 40 years and will likely be there going forward. So you're not only getting safety, guarantees, diversification, you're getting liquidity, access to the money. You can eliminate taxes on this, grow the money tax-free, access it tax-free, and pass it on to the heirs tax-free, but also pick up positive arbitrage when you access the money to use it for other things, whether that's paying bills, investing in other things, whatever it may be. And we talk about that a lot, but let's flip it on the dime. Let's look at it from the other side of the coin. In other words, what's another creative way to create positive arbitrage? And why this is so important is, if inflation indeed does continue to rise, as most people and experts believe it will, because of the extraordinary spending levels our federal government has been doing lately, you need to make your money work for you more than once. You've got to maximize the capacity of your money to grow and gain for you. And if you pick up positive arbitrage, if you're picking up 2.5%, 3% positive arbitrage on your money, and then you take that money and invest it in something, you're just increasing your rate of return, aren't you? Whatever your rate of return is, let's say it's 10%, you just now made it 12.5%, 13%. Well, you add compound interest on that. You do that for several years. The difference is huge. So again, if we're dealing with an inflationary environment, you need to maximize the capacity of your money to grow. Well, here's another way of doing it. So some people say, well, I don't want to fund the policy and then access it from there to access the money to do something with because I don't have the liquid funds available. Okay, that's fine. No problem. What if you have assets, collateral, whatever? What if you have then the ability to get a line of credit or borrow against that asset today at very favorable interest rates that you can lock in with real estate for 30 years? You can lock in, or if you have a property, for example, you can lock in a really low interest rate if you've got good credit and borrow the money very cheaply. Let's use an example. Let's say you can borrow the money in a lot of people I see are getting 30-year mortgages in the 3% range, low threes, some even the high twos, depending on their credit. But let's say you borrow the money at 3%, and then you turn around and took that money and invested it in a high cash value policy with guarantees, and you're earning a 5.75 dividend on it. What's happening? Well, first of all, your borrowing cost is 3%. That same money is now earning 5.75 dividend. You get the difference, the positive arbitrage. So in other words, you're picking up return on monies that were frankly previously sitting dormant. A lot of people talk about, well, you've got equity in bricks and mortar. That's nice, but it's idle. That money's not doing anything for you in many cases. A lot of wealthy people use arbitrage to grow their wealth. This is a very common tactic that's used. Money can be borrowed from any number of sources, assets, or whatever that may be. In fact, I got a couple of banks I could steer you towards They'll actually do lines of credit on just about anything you can think of as long as it has value. And they'll loan the money at very favorable interest rates as long as you have halfway decent credit. So my point is simple. It doesn't have to just be real estate. It can be most anything that has value. And you can pick up, say, 2 or 3% positive arbitrage on that money. Now that asset is growing for you, and the money's just, the equity's not sitting in the bricks and mortar, so to speak. So it's the opposite way of going about the personal bank concept. It's for somebody who doesn't have liquid assets, or they have liquid assets, but they, for whatever reason, at this point don't want to liquidate or access or use because there might be penalties or taxes involved, or they're still getting a favorable rate of return and it's tied up. Well, here's a way to do it without having to come up with any money out of pocket. You're using an asset. This is used very, very commonly, okay? And in fact, just to share a little secret, if you didn't already know, a lot of people, have talked about lately, how you have these multi-billionaires who pay little or no taxes, all right? Well, the secret is, it's not really a big secret. It's really quite obvious. Oftentimes, you take these Elon Musks and these, Bezos with Amazon and these various folks, and why they're paying little or no taxes is they're not earning any income. Their value, their value, their net worth is going up, no question. But if they have a highly appreciating asset like stock in their company, they oftentimes will use a line of credit and borrow against the value of that stock to then access money to live on, pay bills, invest, do whatever. And those loans, the lines of credit, the funds are a loan, so they're not income, so there's no tax. And if they use that money for business purpose, let's say, to expand their business or whatever, oftentimes the interest on those loans can be a tax deduction on top of it. So they're generating money to themselves, not creating a taxable event, and then the interest on that loan that they're getting charged can become a deduction if used for business purpose. The key is, as long as the underlying asset grows at or above the rate that's being charged, the interest rate being charged, they're money ahead. That's called positive arbitrage, folks. And many, many, many wealthy people operate this way. And that's a very common and simple way that many wealthy folks generate tremendous amount of income without creating taxes on it. And again, you can do the same thing. If you have an asset that you can borrow it from that has value, real estate is probably the most common one, but many others can work. You can access from it, and as long as the value, and you can take that money, say, invested in something like your personal bank that's safe, has guarantees, is consistent, steady, and as long as the dividends you're earning, the interest rate you're earning is higher than what you're getting charged, you're money ahead. And frankly, folks, oftentimes, that's a much wiser way to go about your money. Growing your money and making your money work for you rather than just sitting there, like I said, idle in bricks and mortar or whatever. The objection or the perception, the paradigm shift in thinking that has to be overcome is so many people have been taught that, debt is bad. All debt is bad. You want to be debt free. Well, where does that come from? Well, frankly, it comes from today an antiquated view of money and the economy and the asset. See, back in the day, if we go back a couple decades or longer, it was wise to be debt free, pay off your house, pay off your bills, pay off everything, and then live off the income and things like that. The problem we have today is with the monetary policy that the Federal Reserve and our government and the debt that's now been foisted upon us, the low interest rate environment very much favors debt, easy money, easy access to money. And as long as that's the case, one of the things I've heard people say is, look, don't fight the Fed. As long as the government is going to be involved in our financial lives at such a tremendous level, which they are and have been for the past, Well, it really came on strong after 08, 09. That's when they really stepped it up. So the last 12, 13 years, as long as they continue this type of monetary policy, which that's the smarter way to go. In other words, use debt strategically. It's called strategic debt. Don't just borrow money to borrow money. Borrow money to put it to use, put it to work, to earn more. So if you're getting charged less and earning more on it, you gain a positive arbitrage. And that's where the wealth is being created oftentimes for the past decade plus because of the monetary policy, that the world that we're in. And frankly, I don't think anybody sees anything changing in the near future in terms of how our Federal Reserve or monetary policy is going to be, what they're going to do going forward. So, frankly, easy money, monetary policy, all this kind of stuff punishes those who are fiscally responsible and who are savers, who eliminate all their debt and pay everything off and then try to live off of return with some type of guarantees, some type of safety, because the interest rates are so low. This type of monetary policy favors those who borrow. And what I'm saying is you can borrow without risk. You can borrow where you have a situation where you're earning more than you're getting charged, so you're keeping the difference. And as long as that's the case, you're money ahead. You keep the difference, right? The positive arbitrage. That's what your personal bank is all about. Now, people say, well, what if interest rates change in the future? Well, then just pay off the loan. Be done with it. So if the cost of borrowing increases more than what you're earning, then like with your personal bank, the cash is in the policy. At any time, you can just pay off the bill, pay off the debt, pay off the lender, be done. So it eliminates the risk of getting underwater upside down, if you know what I'm trying to say. So as always, I'm just going to encourage you, for more information, if this is interesting to you at all, contact me at yourpersonalbank.com. I can show you how positive arbitrage can work in your favor, get more money in your pocket, and benefit from our monetary policy that our federal government has been pursuing for the last decade plus. And as always, stay tuned to the Your Personal Bank Show.
For more information on Your Personal Bank, feel free to contact Ference at yourpersonalbank.com. This show is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information. The presenter and guest on this program do not engage in legal, accounting, or tax advice. Professional advice regarding your situation should be sought if required. Products and riders may have limitations and may not be available in all states. Excessive unpaid loans may affect performance. Distributions may become taxable if not managed properly. Replacements may not be suitable for everyone. There may be charges when replacing coverage. Compare when considering a replacement. Dividend rates and baseline of credit rates may change. Contact yourpersonalbank.com for current rates.